Greetings, it is October 20th, 2016. I'm going to read the text of an unpublished response I wrote to a review published December 15, 2011 in Forward, then called the Forward. They've since, the senior editor and publisher has since dropped the prefix word "the" from the title of that weekly newspaper, which is published in New York City. It's the English language descendant of the old Forverts, the Yiddish daily that millions of American Jewish immigrants from Eastern Europe read, including my grandparents. Here we go. While I enjoyed Forward Arts and Culture fellow Ezra Glintner's review of John Berger's latest book, titled Bento's Sketchbook, a passage of Berger leaves me twitching and shaking my head with incredulity. Quote, "One protests," Berger writes, "in order to save the present moment, whatever the future holds." End of quote. He continues, quote, "The foreseeing of this final logic is part of what enables a man or a people to fight against overwhelming odds. It is part of the secret of the moral factor which counts as 3-1 against weapon power." End of quote. A decade after my mid-1980s visits to the Warsaw Ghetto Monument, site of the famed sculpture by Nathan Rappaport, there's another one at Yad Vashem in Jerusalem, I learned, on viewing a film about Merrick Edelman, that the bodies of thousands of Jews are, quote-unquote, buried, unconsecrated at that, under the pavement of the site of what was then the ghetto, which was the longtime Jewish district before 1939. Now I'm going to interject here. I understand I haven't been back to Poland since September of 1985. I understand that the Museum of the History of the Jews of Poland, which opened several years ago, is actually at the site of the plaza where the Rappaport monument sculpture is. Hope to get back there. In your obituary of Merrick Edelman, published October 16, 2009, who was the last surviving commander of the Warsaw Ghetto Fighters of the April-May 1943 uprising, you quoted Edelman in reference to the thousands who did not fight during the uprising. Quote, "These people went quietly and with dignity," he said. Quote, "It is an awesome thing when one is going so quietly to one's death. It is definitely more difficult than to go out shooting." End of quote. Further on, the obit continued, quote, "One might say that Edelman's final bullet was saved for those who labeled Jews passive, who said they went like, quote, unquote, sheep to slaughter. In this phrase lies the final indignity to the 6 million who were in fact slaughtered, but who were never complicit, even for a second, in their own genocide." End of quote. Berger contends that the moral factor of resistors, whether physical, with guns and Molotov cocktails, or passive, against weapon power, may have some validity, but what does that mean? The problem is not that Jews resisted, whether violently or passively, but that there were countless millions of people who saw it violently or passively in their role as so-called silent and knowing bystanders to execute the physical annihilation of European Jewry and Romani and Sinti peoples. It is the role of the aggressor murderer and their silent supporters who warrant examination, not the victims. Regarding Berger's 3-1 analytic numeric relevancy of the morality of the victims, contrasted with the military superiority of those who murdered them, there was to be no joy in having been beaten, starved, shot, gassed, tortured, and crushed to death. Death is final, nor is it, as many Christians posit to me, to, quote-unquote, be in a better place. For us to claim that the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising was heroic and a great defining moment in time in the history of this sorrow event is only a way for us to try to grasp at what remains ungraspable and incomprehensible. That's it. C'est tout. Thank you. Merci. Toda rabah.